Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. On April 21st, myself and Professor Mike Geary did a little show on whether or not there's a New England serial killer. And at that time, we believe there were 8 bodies, or 8 remains, we should say, involved in the fears of there being a serial killer across 3 states in New England, across Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And now there are considered to be 13 bodies, or 13 remains, let's put it that way. And at least one of them is already been solved. And the woman's name is Suzanne Wormser, and it was a domestic arrest, and a man named Donald Koffel was arrested for her murder. So that's not being mentioned. So that knocks that down to 12. So the 13 that was being carried in this alleged, or thought of, and the possibility that this was a serial killer. But right now, we're not thinking that it is a serial killer, but we have to admit that there is a possibility as such. So we are looking at the possibility, but we are keeping an open mind. So folks, we're going to go over that this evening. So hold on to your dog, hold on to your cat, hold on to your cup of coffee. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off the cuff zone, the police off the cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, we're deep into the NBA and NHL finals, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We keep dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything. With updated odds on Major League Baseball, UFC, and boxing to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. So joining me this evening is going to be Professor. I just put that new screen on, and I'm going to exit the full screen now. Joining me tonight is Professor Michael Geary, Sergeant, retired NYPD Sergeant, and also attorney. Mike, welcome to the show.
Bill, good evening. Thank you for having me on. Good to see you.
Absolutely. And also joining us this evening is retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn. Welcome to the show, Phil Grimaldi. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you for having me, Billy. How you doing, Mike?
Good to see you, Phil.
I don't know where this is coming from, Phil, this right here. There we go. I don't know where hide the
you
chat.
Seeing the chat?
Yeah, I don't know why the chat's coming up on your picture, but this looks pretty good right now. But anyway,
sorry, I just clicked on a button. I got it.
Okay, very good. Mike, we covered this on April 21st, and as I said, at that point, there was 8 bodies, or 8 sets of remains. Now they just found another body on June 1st, and that's what is sort of bringing this case back into the limelight. So your thoughts on the possibility that this is a serial killer, or whether you think that there's no possibility whatsoever?
Bill, you always have to consider the fact that, yes, the possibility exists that it is a serial killer, and that there hasn't been a discernible pattern, except for all the victims seem to be female. So far as we know, if there's been some bones that have, that need to be looked at. But the possibility exists that, yes, it could be a serial killer. But so far as we could see right now, there doesn't seem to be a definitive serial killer pattern emerging. But we'll see. But you always have to consider that. Yes, it's a possibility.
You know, a 21-year-old woman was what's brought this case back to the forefront. Is a 21-year-old woman was found on June 1st, and her name is Adriana Suazo, and that is considered the 13th unexplained death in the New England region in the recent months. The body of Adriana Suazo was found in a wooded area in the Norfolk district in Milton, Mass. On Sunday, June 1st. She's only 21 years old. Her death comes after several women have been found dead in New England region since March, sparking fears of a serial killer in the region. Suazo's cause of death is being investigated by the chief medical examiner, according to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office. Speculation that a serial killer is operating in New England has been reignited following this discovery of a woman's body in Massachusetts. At around 11:45 a.m. at local time on Sunday, June 1st, the body of a 21-year-old Adriana Suazo was found in a wooded area by a passerby near a home on 143 Central Avenue in Norfolk District in Milton. Norfolk District Attorney Michael Morrissey announced in a press release. Suazo's body showed no obvious signs of trauma. The chief medical examiner is investigating the cause of her death. So at this point, Phil, she's not even considered, it's not considered to be a homicide. So talk about how a homicide investigated now, Phil, with these facts and circumstances would proceed.
Well, basically, from what we know about this latest victim that was found, Adriana Suazo, female, 21 years old, they said there were no obvious signs of trauma. There's no cause of death at this point. After the autopsy, they would be doing testing on different samples that were taken from the victim's body. We know this in the NYPD as a CUPI, cause unknown pending police investigation. That's one of the cases that really no detective wants to get because it's kind of out there. You got to try and figure out the circumstances of what took place in this person's life just prior to the time that they did succumb to whatever it is that killed him. And the medical examiner would help with that testing, as I said. So later on down the line, we could find out perhaps there could have been narcotics in the system, fentanyl, could be signs of strangulation. We don't know just yet. Poisoning, a lot of different things will come into play once the results come back on the toxicology. But in the meantime, the detectives will be investigating this to try and find out, as I said, what were the things that took place in the perhaps days, hours, or moments leading up to the victim's demise. And then again, if they do find that it was perhaps accidental, an overdose, or something of that nature, it would be ruled in that way. If they do find a strangulation symptom, or if they find, some type of poisoning, then it would be classified as a homicide at that point.
In April, the remains of 6 people were found in towns close to one another in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. The victims included Paige Fannin, who you see on the left of this thumbnail. She's 35 years old, who was found in Norwalk River on March 6th. Denise Leary, who is on the right of this thumbnail, who was found in New Haven on March 21st. And Michelle Romano, who you see in the middle, she's 56. She was found 5 days later. And police denied a single suspect in the killings, despite speculation about a serial killer in the area at the time. Right now, the press is calling them killings, but they're not even that. They're undetermined. The only case that we said was Miss Wormsel that was ruled a homicide. And they had an arrested perp in that. And they're not connecting that perp as being a potential serial killer for these other unexplained deaths. Let's put it that way. We can't call them homicides because the medical examiner is not calling them a homicide. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, the difficulty with some of these is that the bodies have been weathered. They've been outside. And so that makes it difficult. And you and Phil know how difficult it is when a body's been left to the point where there's very little tissue left. And they're scattered all over. And it looks like a high number, 13. We talked earlier, and April's like 7 or 8. But I just would like to know, in that area, in that particular geographic area, is it unusual for people to find some people who, in the spring, people who have maybe went missing in the wintertime and ended up dying or of hypothermia, and the bodies are found? If it's only 1 or 2 a year, and now you have 7 or 13, that's cause for alarm. But it's very difficult, as Phil mentioned. You don't know until what you're dealing with until you have the medical examiner deciding what the cause of death is, in their estimation based on what they can see. And in the case where people's bodies are mostly decomposed, it's really difficult. So that makes the beginning of the investigation, when time is of the essence, that makes it really difficult because you're losing a lot of time right off the bat.
I just want to update this a little bit. On 4 of the bodies are classified as unidentified. On April 9th, there was a body found in Killingly, Connecticut. On April 20th, there was a body found in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, also unidentified. And then there was a body also found on Rocky Hill, Connecticut, also unidentified. And another one in Taunton, Massachusetts, and also unidentified. So we're talking 4 bodies there, and 2 homicides. One, Megan Meredith, hers was found April 22nd in Springfield, Massachusetts. She's 45 years old, and that was ruled a homicide. So there was only 2 out of all of these that have been ruled homicides, and we have 4 unidentified bodies, and then 1 skull. So that's 5. So take 7, and what do we have left? And I was never a mathematician, but we have 6, right? We have 6 that we know who they are, but have yet to be ruled upon. So this is still, and I will not say that I'm ruling out that this is the work of a serial killer. There's a distinct possibility but right now, there is nothing that the police are telling us, and this is exacerbated. It's one of my favorite words recently, by multiple police agencies working on these cases. And we don't even know if specifically they're talking to each other. And that's why a case like this calls potentially for a task force. Phil?
Yeah, definitely, Billy. There's only one way to figure out, in my mind, if any of these 13 bodies are connected to the same cause of death, let's say a serial killer, is to do an investigation, and you need a task force, and perhaps they may be doing stuff behind the scenes. We don't know. There's 3 states that are involved, or 3 or 4, but actually it's a very small area. We think it's about 70 miles. I think you said, Billy, right? Around
70-mile radius. Yeah.
70-mile radius. But I'm starting to see a pattern in some of these victims. 34 to 59-year-old is what I'm seeing in some of them. Then we have the ones that are unidentified as well. And when you look at that, that's what you're going to look for. You're going to look for a pattern, an age pattern, a specific type. Are they African American? Are they white? Are they short? Are they tall, petite, blonde hair? Different things of that nature with regard to, like, I'm going to talk about the Rex Heuermann. I'll bring that up as an example. The Rex Heuermann case, those were women that were in the sex trade. Are any of these people involved in stuff like that? So those are all the things that a task force would try to link together. Now, there's obviously going to be some of these victims that are not going to be tied to this if it does become a pattern. I don't believe in such coincidences so easily. I'm going to have to be convinced that this is just that, a coincidence. I don't see it. Are they all connected? I don't think so. We already know that one of the victims, there was an arrest made, and then the perpetrator died in custody. So we'll just take that one and put it on the side. But for the most part, are all of these cases connected? I doubt it highly that they're all connected, but I do think there could be a possibility, since a lot of the locations where the victims were found were wooded areas or very desolated areas. And then we have to look at the cause of death, the means in which the victims' bodies were found. Mike brought up a point about it's difficult sometimes to come up with a cause of death when a body is very decomposed. But if a knife is used, sometimes you can tell that there was a knife wound in that skeletal remain. If there's a bullet, obviously a bullet hole in the head or something of that nature, you will see damage where and bullet may even be recovered. So it's not impossible to figure out the causes of death, even if the bodies are severely decayed, but it does make it quite difficult. Obviously, if you have a body that's only been dead for a couple hours, it would be much easier to figure out everything's intact.
But Phil, you know, so let me just bring us back to
Go
reality
ahead.
too. You know, 4 unidentified bodies, 1 skull. There's 5 right there that we don't know what the hell is going on with them, right? 2 are homicides, 1 cleared by an arrest. So we know the one cleared by an arrest, unless when they put these cases together, there is evidence against the perp in that homicide, who was Donald Koffel, who was arrested and then died in custody. So this becomes very complicated. So 5, right? So 6. So what do you got left? You got 7 left. And
Seven left. But again, Billy, let's look at the locations where these victims' bodies were found. In a lot of the cases, they're in wooded areas or desolated areas. So, I mean, you know, if you die in a car accident or you die at home, it's not unusual. You know, what I mean by not unusual, there's a cause that you can come up with right away. But these people are being found in wooded areas and stuff. There has to be some type of a nexus here. I don't know if they're connected or if they're just random. But again, the cause of death is going to be probably one of the most important things that they have to figure out.
let me go to News Nation, because they recorded something and they brought this back into the public consciousness just very recently.
List of things police hate more than anything, mysteries would actually be very close to the top. Cops seem to hate mysteries, and victims' families hate mysteries too. You can imagine why. So imagine how frustrated investigators are feeling in 3 New England states right now: Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. They are looking at 13 unexplained deaths since the beginning of the year, with no answers, no suspects, and for now, no reason to believe those deaths are connected. But if some of those deaths are linked, authorities may have a serial killer on their hands. I want to bring in Dr. Michelle Dupree, a former medical examiner and police detective, who's also the author of several criminal investigation field guides. Dr. Dupree, it's always nice to see you. You know, a lot of people have been asking me about this one for, you know, it got a lot of headlines because one of the bodies was found near Taylor Swift's house in Rhode Island. People are like, oh my gosh, New England serial killer. What do you think of it? I mean, is it possible they're connected?
Absolutely. You know, law enforcement does not like coincidences, and 13 bodies in a relatively small area, that's too much of a coincidence.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I named the 3 states. I mean, it is a pretty small area. What does your gut tell you? I mean, from what we know so far, and some of them are just bones apparently, so it's hard to know much. But is there anything you're seeing that, like, commonalities between any of these bodies?
There is. Obviously, as you mentioned, the area. It is a relatively small area. That's a lot of bodies in a short period of time. It doesn't mean that they were all killed in that period of time, but they were found in that period of time, and many of them, or several of them, were relatively recent. The other thing is that most of them are females, and we do know that most serial killers are male, and most serial killers do target females. And so I think that right there is a very good reason to suspect that they may be connected. We also don't know the cause of death on many of these. And I believe that the police may be holding that back. Even if it is skeletonized, we can still tell a lot about the body and perhaps even how that person died.
So I was just looking at the map again. And you've got all these different states involved, different little police departments in that part of New England. Yeah, there's the map there. So you can see there's quite a few areas. How do they handle investigation like this when it's crosses over different states and police lines?
That does make it certainly more difficult, because working across jurisdictions is it is common, but it requires a lot of coordination. It makes it a lot more complex. And yes, this would be a great case to call in the FBI, but of course that is up to the individual jurisdiction to do that, or to a task force if they have formed one.
What about the time of year right now? You know, in terms of things thawing out, and I hate to be sort of gruesome, but it seems like we see more bodies sort of become discovered around this time of year.
Yes, and you're absolutely right about that. Warmer weather may tend to bring bodies up that were in, say, a body of water or something. Additionally, this time of weather, a lot more people are outside. They're more likely to find things. People are out in the woods. They're hiking, they're camping, they're hunting. So finding a body is much more likely in this type of weather, in this climate.
I guess we'll wait and see if I mean, I hope no more pop up here, but it seems like there has been this sort of trend. Whether they're actually connected, we don't know at this point, but we'll certainly keep an eye on it. Dr. Dupree, appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you so much.
So a lot of what we had just previously said was that they should establish a task force so that
100%.
all these police jurisdictions know what the others are talking about, know what the others have. They may not even be talking to each other. You know, detectives can be very stubborn, as you know, Phil, and they can be very secretive. I used to call some squirrels in our squad secret squirrels.
Oh yeah, we had those in my squad.
And they would purposely not put stuff on paper so that other people wouldn't find out about it. And that sort of became a thing of the past once we went to the DD5 system that was computerized. But before that, people would hold on to their paperwork because just so they didn't want their compadres, their fellow detectives, knowing what they had in their case.
A lot of guys were territorial too. They didn't want the FBI involved in their investigation sometimes because they wanted to do it their way and stuff like that. So you have three or four different states here, and I think the only way to really get a solid answer on whether or not any of these cases are connected would be with the task force, and the task force will, reveal results, and perhaps maybe some of the cases will be solved, or they'll be listed as a natural death or an accidental death, or an overdose, whatever it turns out to be. But you definitely need I think the FBI is probably the one to do it since it's multi-states, the jurisdictional boundaries. FBI covers all the states in the country. So that would probably be the starting point. And then take detectives from the different locals, the different locations where these bodies are found, and you have your task force. And we know what the task force did when Rodney Harrison formed it over in Suffolk County in the Gilgo Beach murder case. I'm a little biased because I know a little bit about Rodney Harrison. He was in the NYPD. I never worked for him, but he was known to be a great detective and a great boss throughout the years. So again, you just put the effort in, you put the manpower in, you put the people together, everybody's heads come together, and they solved that case rather quickly.
Absolutely. Mike, I wanted to say that one of the things that could put these cases together and give us a definitive answer on whether it's a serial killer or not, or one person doing these killings, is science. You want to speak about that, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, anytime you can get, look at referring to the Rex Sherman case, and some of those poor ladies' remains, you would have the only thing connecting him would be a couple of hairs. And in a couple of cases, there was some burlap wrapping that was like camouflage. There was like a little bit of a pattern discovered, and you had his hair. So in these cases, when the bodies are out in the woods and they've been there for a long time, everything deteriorates. And if it's not handled as carefully as maybe the NYPD would, you may have a lot of small little tidbits of evidence that may actually be there, but may have been missed. And once you miss, a single human hair or two human hairs in the woods, you're not going to find that ever again. So that makes it really difficult. And another thing too, with the science, when you want to talk about, computerizing records and things, you have all these little different departments, and many of them have small budgets, and many of them probably aren't used to working together, and they don't really have any real means of working together. They may not have done it in the past. So they may not know really how to do it themselves. And I think Phil's right. Get the FBI, because they have the technological means to do everything, and get them together, put them in charge, get a couple of your best detectives, and look at this for 6 months. As you said, with the Gilgo Beach task force, I think within less than 6 months from its
I think it was 2 months, Mike. 2
months, right?
2 months.
Once they started the task force, you're right.
Information. So
they identified that vehicle, that SUV.
Right. And that's when he was called the Big Ogre.
Ogre, yes, that's right.
That was a huge breakthrough. So they should do something like that.
You know, what Mike is talking about also is that you put the brains together of 15 or 20 top investigators, and that is how you start getting results, and specifically in a serial killer case, or even a case like this. And even if this turns out not to be a serial killer, that's very important. Folks, this Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button. That really helps us with the algorithm. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you could become a member of the Police Off the Cuff YouTube family and become part of the Police Off the Cuff family here. Desert Moon. I used to live up in that area with the Navy. All around those areas, you have a naval sub base, you have sub school, you have sub prototype, OCS, and you have military housing. Are you suggesting, Desert Moon, that this could be someone from the military? If this turns out to be a serial killer, that this could be Desert Moon. I literally did a double take when I saw the map where they found the bodies. You know, that's a lot of investigation is what I call hypothesizing and theorizing. Phil calls it spitballing. And your theory is as good as any. And yes, that might be an avenue that investigators look toward when they're looking for a potential. Once they have the science down, and once many of these cases, so we actually have now 7 that potentially could be homicides, right? So hopefully there'll be some forensic evidence that could link them together, or something that points to potentially one person has committed these unalivings. We can't even call them homicides yet. Phil?
Billy, if they have linked them, or if they ruled them as homicides, let's say 5 or 6 or 7 of them become homicides. Okay, now we're gonna definitely take a look at what she just brought up, the map of the area. What's going to be the common denominator in that area? And if that base is the common denominator, I'm sure the investigators will definitely explore that. And again, with the way those victims, if there is 5 or 6 or 7 or even 2 homicides, how did they die? What was the cause of death? What's the similarities in the victims, or what the way they were found? Is there an age similarity? So all of those things have to be explored. And once they figure that part out, that was a great point that Desert Moon brought up. When she saw that map, she saw from her own knowledge, she knows that there's a naval base in the area. Perhaps it could be linked to that, if there is in fact homicides. We don't even know if these have been ruled homicides. Only 1 or 2 of them have been ruled as a homicide. So we have to, seems like there's almost like a media shutdown on this. They're not giving out much information at all. Perhaps it's being done purposely.
This is a local station.
Killer might be on the loose in New England. You've probably seen the posts in your news feeds, or you've come across coverage in mainstream media. There's no question New England serial killer talk has grown into something of a phenomenon, but we're asking if there's anything to it.
In the beginning of March, online sleuths were the first to pick up on a dark trend. They noticed bodies turning up all across southern New England. And as each body was discovered, membership in the private Facebook discussion group New England SK soared. Here, members openly discussed the possibility that some or all of the bodies recently discovered throughout Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts might be the work of a serial killer. The speculation growing so loud, law enforcement responded. In Framingham, where a body was found on April 10th, the DA said, information gathered at the scene does not indicate foul play. In Springfield, where a 45-year-old woman's body was found in late April, the DA said, unverified claims can compromise active investigations. At this time, there is no indication that these incidents are connected to each other, or are they part of a larger public safety threat.
We have law enforcement saying there is no serial killer, yet people are still thinking that there might be a serial killer out there.
They want to believe, and social media backs it up.
David Richard is a professor of public relations at Emerson College. He's not surprised that concern over an unconfirmed potential New England serial killer is spreading like wildfire.
We almost kind of want there to be something like this, because in a way, the news and social media have merged together and it's become infotainment for us.
New England has long had a fascination with serial killers. In the 1960s, it was the Boston Strangler case. In the early 90s, the still unsolved New Bedford highway murders attracted national attention.
The FBI gives the definition of a serial killer when there are 3 or more in a period of time. By that definition,
She's actually wrong. It's 2 or more. She just spit out.
You know what, Billy? When I looked it up today, it did say, the FBI does say it's 3, but I believe what you're saying is correct.
No, it's absolutely 2 or more. It is. It's not 3. And if you Google it, it'll say 3, but it's actually 2 or more.
Yeah, it's 2 or more.
2 or more on separate occasions, of course,
Yeah.
with time in between.
They talk about the time in between too.
Yep.
these 3 are related, then that's what we're looking at.
More recently, law enforcement focused on a string of unsolved murders of women from the Maine South area of Worcester. But what about now? Why are people focusing on these New England cases?
It's exciting for them, unfortunately. I think it's exciting for them to think that there is, because it's something that is that water cooler talk, right? The things that we used to do standing, at the coffee machine at work, now we're doing that in Facebook groups.
Angel Wood hosts the podcast Crime of the Truest Kind. She's skeptical about the possibility of a current New England serial killer, and she hopes the discussion may soon turn towards the victims and their families in other unresolved cases.
I feel like it's good that people are looking at these cases because these cases need more attention. But I'm always thinking about the families and how this is going to impact them.
My sources in the law enforcement community tell me these latest cases in New England are isolated and are most likely not the work of a serial killer. But as we've seen, interest in these cases remains high and people will always be watching.
So one of the things you learn from being an investigator, Mike Geary, is that never, ever get tunnel vision.
Mhm.
Tunnel vision has you just look straight ahead and you lose your objectivity. You lose the ability to have an open mind. And Phil and I will tell you that that is the worst to get tunnel vision. I've made thousands of mistakes on my police career. Oh, no, he didn't do it. And then the next thing I see the guy walking in handcuffs. What happened? Oh, he just confessed, So you can't have tunnel vision. So even with the Gilgo Beach case, look for how many years. Oh no! Remember the Irish guy Richard Dorner, who was the PC out there. There's no way this is a serial killer. No, no way is this a serial killer. With the thick Irish accent. What was it? It was a serial killer, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, I remember the clip of the news media when he was saying that, and literally they're dragging 3 bodies out of a sand dune, and he's like, "No, nothing. Look at here." I guess in his department and the resource he had in his own skill, he'd rather not see that. He'd rather whistle past the graveyard and not see any big bad monsters there, because he couldn't handle it, and probably the department at that time may not have had the resources or the expertise to handle something like that. So just go into denial mode,
Well, Mike, there used to be a saying in the police department. There was 2 of them. Don't make waves. That was one of them, and the second one was, make it go away.
That's right.
And that was like an old IAB lieutenant used to say that to me. Make it go away. We can't make it go away. You can't hide a
Make
murder.
it go away with an arrest. That's how you make it go away.
Yes.
You follow somebody.
But Phil, I want to just say with this instance, and I made a lot of bad objectivity calls with the Gilgo Beach case, and because I was believing a lot of the things that perhaps the detectives had put out there, and there was so many different turns. Let's not forget, Rex Schulman's career, if we believe he's guilty, went back to 1993. That is the first documented murder that had his DNA on the victim. And they had just found out about that in like the last year. That's right. 1993. So as they were saying, oh, no, this is not the work of a serial killer. No way. 1993 it goes back to. So I don't ever want to use the tunnel vision or not think with an open mind. This could be a serial killer. I'm not saying it is, but you have to be an investigator with an open mind. Phil.
Yeah, I'm with that detective that was in that Banfield report. I don't believe in such coincidences. Of the 13 bodies, I got a gut feeling that perhaps some of these are going to be connected because of the fact that they're in such different jurisdictions. And even though, police departments might be, comparing notes over the phone or whatever, I would be much happier if there was like one body investigating the whole case, like we said with the FBI. So that way we'd have everybody under the same roof, so to speak, and we'd have everybody in the same playing field. And we're going to be comparing notes on a daily basis. Well, we're going to be spitballing, which that's a term I always use. And that's how you get, you have competent people doing investigations on all different types of victims here. You have 13. They're going to come up with different things, and they're going to come up with their theories. And once they get together and they sit down and they spitball, you might be able to link some of these cases together. And just based on that map, when I look at that map and I see all those red dots, even though it's 3 or 4 states, it just it jumps out at me. I find it hard to believe that, okay, a few victims, we know one was there was an arrest made, but being found out in the woods or found in desolated areas in such a small area, to me, I think there's going to be a connection. And it may be more than one person involved. It may not be it could be 2 serial killers, or it could be other murders that just the victims were left, and there could be multiple perpetrators. But I think this definitely needs to be looked at in a task force type operation.
100%. Let me put this on from Law and Crime.
What is your response to this ongoing public concern about a potential serial killer in New England? Because it just doesn't hit, Rhode Island, it hits other states.
When you look at these 3 women on the screen, there is a certain typology there.
Absolutely, bro. You read my mind.
A certain type, and that sometimes is indicative of potentially a serial killer. And that's just one little hint. And I'm not saying it's definitive, but it's something you have to look at.
Do you see there could be something here? Do you see a pattern that would support any of these fears?
So first thing, this has definitely hit a fever pitch. Everyone that I know has basically asked me, is there a serial killer? Anyone that I have seen in the public, a lot of people are concerned. It is definitely hit a fever pitch, almost hysteria-like with a lot of people, especially locally. We are a tight-knit community here. As of right now, I have not worked any of the other cases. I have not seen the case files. Only as of recently, some of the cause of death and manner of death were released. So looking at what I have right now, I do not believe there is a serial killer. Unfortunately, addiction runs rampant with some of these bodies that you do find out in the wilderness, by the woods, trails, water. Homeless people do tend to live in these types of areas. And unfortunately, self-harm is still a large problem in our community. The other aspect of it, the arrest was made in Groton. Another thing with homicides, it's mostly people that you are known to you. It's domestic related, it's business partners, it's people that are acquaintances. So, and that's
that person they showed on the screen. I'll go back to it. Let me see if I can get his face on the screen. He's the one that was charged with
runs rampant
we'll see it.
Some of these bodies that you do find out in the wilderness,
His name
by
is
the
Donald
woods,
Koffel.
trails, water. Homeless people do tend to live in these types of areas. And unfortunately, self-harm is still a large problem in our community. The other aspect of it, the arrest was made in...
That's Donald Koffel, who was arrested for killing Suzanne Wormser. So unless they believe he is the serial killer, then that murder is solved. And unless they think he may have committed some of the other ones, that case should be taken off the 13 cases that they have.
Rotten. Another thing with homicides, it's mostly people that you are known to you. It's domestic related, it's business partners, it's people that are acquaintances. So, and that's what it looks like in the Groton. It was an ex-roommate. But as of right now, without looking at each individual case file, I cannot say that there is a serial killer or any links between any of those other cases. But it's something we did explore for us. But that's where we're at right now with that.
So this is going back a couple of months ago. But could there be a nexus between these cases that we don't yet know about? Yes, there could be. And as I said, I want to keep an open mind. And I think as an investigator, you have to keep an open mind. And, police departments do tend to not want a high profile case like this because it opens up, what they'll say in law enforcement as a bag of worms, Oh no, don't open up a bag of worms, make it go away, don't make waves, all of those cliche expressions. But you have to look at this like it could be a serial killer. And even if it was just geographically, a 70-mile radius across 3 states, a lot of the areas where the bodies were found are off the 95 North Corridor.
Yes.
So that's a commonality that we cannot ignore. Mike.
Yeah, Bill. I was looking at the map that you showed a little while ago, and I think with Desert Moon, and she's talking about people coming to a base and leaving. They're not going to be there for a long time, so they're not well known in the community. They're doing their training and they're going. And I was looking at that, thinking about like 95 and some of the other roads, like 91 in Connecticut, and heading over towards Boston. It could be that there is that commonality that maybe there's someone who's driving a delivery truck, a trucker. The FBI had, looked at the number of times that long haul truckers have been, accused of or thought to have committed serial killings across various states from, New York to California. And they've come up with, like, I think the last number I saw was like over the years, like 24. So you have to look at those things, patterns, age of the victim, gender of the victim, race of the victim, hair color, profession of the victims. If you could find out, if alcohol, narcotics use of the victims, mental health issues for the victims, where do they frequent? What are their hobbies? And some of the most difficult things here in these cases, there's a number of them where we don't even have the ID. So we can't even go back and figure out who their family members are to really begin a good, thorough homicide investigation. But patterns take a while to emerge. And I think Desert Moon had a great idea. If you see a pattern, you got to investigate it.
Desert Moon just said we should bring her on the show. For me, it's the constant discovery of bodies within a relatively short period of time in a relatively small geographic area. It's just difficult to believe. It's all
there you have it.
Desert Moon, I have to agree with you. But something, until we find a nexus, which is a law enforcement word, they love that word, and then just simply a connection between these recovered remains, these recovered bodies. When we put the pictures up of those 3 young ladies, well, this isn't the same picture, but these were 3 also bodies that were found. And what is the commonality right there? This differentiates. The first one, Paige Fannin, is 35 years old, right? And the second one, Michelle Romano, she's 56, and Denise Leary is 59. What do we know about their victimology? What do we know about their backgrounds? What do we know about their work? What do we know about their personal relationships? What do we know about their education? What do we know about their alcohol and drug use? What do we know about their sexual behaviors? All of those things comprise victimology, which to an investigator is the gold standard of finding out what may have happened to this individual. That's the starting point. Well, actually, the starting point, one of the most important things in homicide investigation is identifying the victim. Without identifying the victim, it's almost like you don't have a place to start from, except if there's physical evidence on the scene. But identifying, having a name is the place that you start out. And that is so important. That comprises the first page, the first paragraph of victimology. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, that's the place to start, because if you don't have that, then you don't have any. You can't begin to even gather evidence. If there's no missing persons report on someone, and the family doesn't know they're missing, that makes it difficult. If there's someone who doesn't have any identification, or they're too decomposed to get fingerprints or any sort of ID on them, as we've seen in some of these cases, you can't even begin that. And that, that study, that victimology study, will tell you who are they close to? Because we do know that most all the time you already know your killer. If you're going to be the victim of a violent killing, that you probably already know your killer. And in this case, where if you get to know who they are, then you get to know who's their former boyfriend, who's their present boyfriend, who's their former husband, who's their present, husband. Who did they break up with recently? Was it amicable? You start talking to their friends. Did they talk about threats made? That gives you opens up a potpourri of leads that you can go on. Right here, everybody wants to hold open the possibility that this may be a serial killer, but right now, what we have in terms of solid objective evidence is, other than coincidence, and I don't like coincidence, and like Phil hates coincidence too. I don't like coincidence, but other than that, we don't have anything solid to connect them right now, unfortunately.
This is from our show from April 21st. I'm just going to play a little bit of it.
Where people can call in tips, and the more tips you have, the better it is, rather than having people call in a tip to the Framingham Police Department and someone else in Foster, Rhode Island. You've got a whole people talking about all these different these 7 ladies. Now, some of them, since the undetermined cause of death, that's very troubling. But you still have to ID them before you even really get going on a case. And so you start talking to people because you don't know who to talk to yet. But some of these things, it's going to be under investigation, maybe because some of them are skeletal remains, partial or full. It makes it really difficult to ID them. So the ID, you may have to load up, besides looking at the missing reports from the last year or two, you have to go and see if there is any sort of DNA from a family member loaded up onto like a 23andMe kind of site. These are going to take a while. These are going to take time just to get the ID and get a real investigation going. But the problem is the public confidence isn't there right now, because the public doesn't seem like they're getting any sort of answers. Terse answers. We saw when you put it up, a very terse answer from the Rhode Island Police Department. And that doesn't really give the public any sort of confidence in what is going on, that the police even know what they're doing. Now, they probably do, but at least let the public know what steps you're taking. You don't have to have that press conference every day, but just let the public know what steps you are taking and basically how long it may take to do some of this work. Getting a cell phone, information might take a month. Getting information back from a genetic genealogy site may take a long time. These things take time, but the public needs to be assured that the police are taking these cases very seriously.
Mike, that was from our show from April 21st. And really nothing has changed much since then, except on April 21st, there was 8 bodies. And now on June 10th, there are 13, but with 1 solved case. So you were right. Like, people, they want transparency. But in cases like this, Phil, there's reasons why detectives don't release some of the information. They don't have a perp. They don't have a suspect. They don't know, in fact, if this is a serial killer or not.
Absolutely, Billy. And with the fact that there are so many podcasters and people that are into true crime, the less information they give out, it's probably better for the investigation, because we know in past cases where people showed up at crime scenes or interviewing possible very important witnesses to a case, and it just compromises the whole investigation. So I like the fact that they're being tight-lipped. One of the first things that I would do in this type of case is this David Koffel. I would look right into him immediately to try and say, okay, 100% that case is not involved. It looks like there was an arrest made. Let's take that off of the group of cases. And then, they talked about in that News Nation report that you showed from Banfield, there's homeless people. None of those people looked like they were homeless to me. Those pictures that you put up, they're actually very attractive looking women. So, was those recent photos or those old photos? And when you look at the spread of the ages, you're talking about 34 to 59, they didn't look that far apart in age, even though their ages was significantly different. the look was generally basically the same, kind of like middle-aged, I would say. So with all of these things, they have to be looked at, and you have to first start to say, you know what, let's remove this person, this victim from the case. Let's remove that. And let's focus on the ones that we think there could be, the word that Billy used earlier, a nexus. And again, we also have to have cause of death. If these things are ruled homicides, then we know, I mean, they could be all drug overdoses, but still be connected. So cause of death is going to be very, very important. And let's find that nexus, that word that Billy used earlier. Very, very important.
100%. Let me play another local station.
Boston 25 News reporter Bob Ward joins us live in Brockton. Bob, the talk is getting loud enough for police to address these rumors.
Rachel, more and more people online are paying attention to this. They are concerned that some or all of these cases might be connected and that a serial killer might be striking in New England. In some corners of social media, like Facebook, the idea that a serial killer could be on the prowl in New England is getting more popular. This Facebook group, New England SK, has nearly 9,000 members. And in other forums, people are posting their concern that some or all of the bodies recently found in New England might be connected to each other. Since the beginning of March, 7 bodies have turned up in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. Some of the bodies are unidentified remains. The bodies discovered in Groton and Killingly, Connecticut, are close to a Rhode Island case. So far, law enforcement is not connecting the cases. However, the talk online has grown so loud that recently Groton, Connecticut police issued a statement that said in part, regarding references circulating on social media about incidents in the state of Rhode Island, we currently have no information connecting those events to any of the incidents in Groton. Here in Massachusetts, the discovery of a human skull in Plymouth and another set of remains in Framingham is also being looked at. In the late 1980s, a serial killer struck the New Bedford area. 9 women murdered, 2 missing. Author Maureen Boyle covered the case at the time and wrote a book about it. She is skeptical that a new serial killer might be at work right now.
Just because you have bodies found in a variety of places in New England, that does not mean that there's a serial killer on the loose in the area.
Boyle is concerned that online speculation can hurt people.
This is not a game. These involve real people. These involve real families. This is serious business.
I checked on the 2 Massachusetts cases. On that body that was found in Framingham recently, the district attorney's office is saying a case is under investigation, but it does not appear that person was a victim of foul play. Now, as for the remains of the human skull that was found in the woods of Plymouth, the Plymouth County DA's office says that case remains under investigation. Reporting live from Brockton tonight.
So that was earlier on. That was when they had 7 bodies, and now, as we know, there's 13 sets of remains. So, as we said earlier on in the show, is that we're trying to keep an open mind, and we're not saying that there is a serial killer, but we're also saying that we're not saying there is not. So, Mike, your final thoughts.
Yeah, you have to keep an open mind and not go with conspiracy theories. So I hope that serial killer, Facebook group, they keep it to more of an analytical kind of thing, not just rumors and hearsay and things like that. That get people all excited, and rumors go rampant when there's a dearth of information. We've seen this in the Koberger case already, with thinking that a bartender might have been the one that committed the crime, or someone's former boyfriend, or a professor. So I would hope that the people would stay calm and just realize, the police should give a little bit more than a few terse statements. But on the other hand, they don't want to give too much information away in case this actually is a serial killer case. So therefore, the public just needs to be. Unfortunately, I wish the PDs would be a little bit better with the communication, but the police should know that the police are being tight-lipped for a reason, and the investigation is going to take a while.
100%. Phil, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. There's only one way to know if there's a serial killer on the loose in this area is investigation by a task force. That's what I think has to be done in this case. We went over so many things today. These are real people. These are victims. They deserve justice. Let's get to the bottom of it. Were they accidental? Were they suicides? Were they overdoses? Were they homicides? That's what we need to figure out. It's not that hard to do. Good investigators will be able to do that. Again, the only way to know if all of these cases or some of them are connected is by a massive investigation by a task force. That's what I'm calling for. I think, Bill, you're saying the same thing. Mike, I'm sure you're in the same playbook as me. And that's what we need. Listen, let's get justice for these victims. There's 13 people that lost their lives. Let's figure it out.
100%. I totally agree with Phil. I think because there's multiple police jurisdictions, I think it's complicated. I think they also could use the resources of the FBI.
Absolutely.
Let's start a task force and get to the bottom of this, and we'll figure out whether or not this is the work of a serial killer or it has nothing to do with a serial killer. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff. On behalf of myself, Mike Geary, and Phil Grimaldi, have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode